The drama surrounding the San Antonio Spurs' sudden transformation from irrelevance to one of the NBA's most frighteningly talented young squads is nothing short of remarkable. For 2 decades, the Spurs were the gold standard of stability and excellence in the league, a franchise defined by culture, discipline, and 5 championships spanning 3 different decades. But by the 2018-19 season, the dynasty that had become synonymous with Greg Popovich's relentless system and the quiet genius of players like Kawhi Leonard had unraveled. Kawhi's departure was more than just the loss of a superstar, it was the crumbling of a cornerstone, a shift that left the roster devoid of spacing, identity, and structure. Suddenly, the Spurs were no longer feared. They were overlooked. From 2019 to 2024, the franchise missed the playoffs 6 straight years, producing its worst 5-year stretch in franchise history. They didn't just decline, they collapsed. There was no go-to scorer, no defensive anchor, and the pieces of the roster aging veterans, developing prospects, and stopgap players failed to connect. Lonnie Walker couldn't evolve into the star scorer they had hoped for. DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge had aged beyond their primes. DeJounte Murray and Derek White were traded for draft capital, and Joshua Primo became one of the league's most infamous flameouts. San Antonio's collapse wasn't for lack of effort. It was a structural implosion that required more than patchwork fixes. What the Spurs desperately needed was a new identity and, more importantly, a generational star to rebuild around. That star arrived in 2023 in the form of Victor Wembanyama, a 7'4" prodigy whose arrival instantly redefined the Spurs' trajectory. Wembanyama wasn't just a player. He was the foundation for a new era. With guard skills, elite rim protection, and the potential to anchor both offense and defense, he provided the Spurs with the piece they had been missing for half a decade. The organization, led by CEO R.C. Buford Angie and Brian Wright, embraced a long-term developmental strategy, restructuring around youth, skill development, and careful roster construction. Popovich, still the architect of the system, resigned to make way for a vision that combined his disciplined philosophy with modern NBA strategies, and suddenly San Antonio didn't look lost, they looked reborn. Yet, even with Wembanyama dominating on both ends of the floor, the Spurs roster was far from complete. They lacked a primary ball handler, spacing was inconsistent, veteran leadership was thin, and late-game execution remained a problem. The 2024 draft did not deliver a miracle co-star, placing them 4th overall. But the Spurs made a strategic choice, selecting Stephon Castle, a versatile, defensive-minded guard whose intelligence, toughness, and adaptability aligned perfectly with the Spurs' identity. Castle was not asked to score immediately but to anchor the perimeter defense and provide structure, allowing Wembanyama to thrive without carrying the entire team. The Spurs' rebuild didn't stop at the draft. Understanding that young players require mentorship and structure, the front office made critical free agent acquisitions. Chris Paul joined as a veteran organizer, a living blueprint of winning basketball whose role was to manage the offense and instill stability. Harrison Barnes brought consistent floor spacing and professionalism, stabilizing rotations and relieving Wembanyama from impossible burdens. Rather than chasing stars, the Spurs built a functioning ecosystem around their generational talent. Slowly, methodically, the Spurs repaired the post-Kawhi cracks, defining roles, emphasizing spacing, and instilling defensive discipline. Early struggles persisted, turnovers, inconsistent spacing, and offensive stagnation reminded the team that youth comes with growing pains. Castle's offensive game was raw, secondary scorers were inconsistent, and Wembanyama still carried an outsized load. Yet the Spurs never panicked. They allowed players to develop naturally within the system, fostering growth rather than forcing short-term wins. The difference between a collapsing franchise and a rising contender became clear in this deliberate approach. The Spurs were no longer chasing results, they were engineering a new identity. The transformative moment came with the acquisition of De'Aaron Fox, a proven elite point guard whose arrival completed the team's backcourt puzzle. Fox provided the missing engine, the floor leadership Wembanyama needed to maximize impact. Suddenly, pick and rolls became lethal. Spacing improved, turnovers declined, and late-game execution became a strength rather than a liability. Castle settled into his defensive role. Devin Vassell found consistent scoring windows, and the young wings finally had structure. With Wembanyama as the centerpiece, Fox orchestrating the offense, and Castle locking down opposing guards, the Spurs transformed from a talented but disjointed collection of youth into a cohesive, terrifying unit. By midseason, Wembanyama was already an NBA star, not as a novelty but as a dominant force reshaping both ends of the floor. The Spurs were no longer a rebuilding team. They were a team with identity, structure, and momentum. The Spurs' subsequent moves reinforced this trajectory. In the 2025 draft, they struck again, selecting Dylan Harper, a polished offensive guard whose skill set complemented Wembanyama and Fox perfectly. Harper's ability to handle, score, and defend added a new layer of versatility, giving San Antonio depth and balance that had been absent for years. Veteran stabilizers like Johnson, Barnes, and Jeremy Sochan held the team together, while young talents filled in crucial gaps. The Spurs were now fast, intelligent, and connected on both ends, a stark contrast to the chaotic post-Kawhi years. 8 players averaged double-digit points, and 10 logged more than 15 minutes per game, a testament to depth, balance, and developmental foresight. What had seemed like a distant project became a contending team within 2 seasons, a rare feat in modern NBA history. The Spurs' resurgence wasn't built on luck or flashes of talent alone. It was a meticulous, long-term plan executed with patience, intelligence, and a willingness to invest in the growth of youth rather than immediate results. From chaos and irrelevance, they created an ecosystem where a generational talent like Wembanyama could thrive alongside complementary stars and intelligent role players. Defense became an identity, spacing became consistent, and the offense gained pace and purpose. By the time this season unfolded, San Antonio wasn't just relevant, they were one of the most feared teams in the Western Conference. A blueprint for how franchises can rebuild without sacrificing philosophy, culture, or discipline. The Spurs had rewritten the narrative, moving from a collapsing dynasty to one of the fastest, most methodical rebuilds in modern NBA history, showing the league what happens when vision, development, and talent converge now. The question is no longer whether the Spurs can rebuild, they have. The question is how far they can go. Can Wembanyama, Fox, and Harper continue to grow into a championship-level core? Can Popovich's system and the Spurs' modern approach maintain dominance in the West? And how will the rest of the league respond to a team that seems to be evolving faster than anyone expected? We want to hear your thoughts. Which moves do you think define the Spurs' transformation the most? Do you believe they are ready to contend now, or is this still a work in progress? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoy cinematic, in-depth NBA storytelling, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next deep dive feature into basketball's most fascinating stories.